For those that understand the direction in which the Horus Heresy unfolded, it's easy to cast blame to one single traitor legion above all others, the Word-Bearers. But upon further analysis of the origin of this villainous faction, we quickly realize that the zealotry of the Word-Bearers, or the Imperial Heralds as they were originally known, was a product of the Emperor's will. Like most traitor legions, when we learn about the history of these traitorous Astartes, it's difficult not to sympathize with these warriors. Since birth, they were predisposed to faith and belief in a world where every place of worship was being destroyed and true believers persecuted by the very same hands that sowed the Word-Bearers' conviction. During the Great Crusade, before the Legion was reunited with their Primarch, Lorgar, the Imperial Heralds were formed from the sons of the exterminated foes of the Emperor of Mankind, those barbaric states of Old Terra that resisted to the last man. A sin against the Imperium of Man that the Imperial Heralds would be trained never to forget. Drilled into the minds of each neophyte, like combat stratagems for any other legion, the Imperial Heralds were raised with the knowledge of the crimes of their forebearers, and taught that the only road to salvation would be through bolter show and conquest. Taught to view themselves as penitent warriors, they marched into battle with a righteousness and a purpose that only a warrior seeking atonement could achieve. This ancient legion would redeem itself for the sins of their fathers by fighting with cold fury and a battle lust identical to utter devotion for those who worshipped the ancient gods of old earth. Every world conquered by the military might of the Imperial Heralds was viewed as a blessed sacrament for the soldiers of this legion. Every blood spilled, every body slain, signified a sacred act that brought them closer to salvation. As the Great Crusade progressed, there is no way the Emperor of Mankind didn't realize the zealotry of his legion. Even their fellow Astarte warriors knew that the Imperial Heralds were different, naming them Iconoclasts, a more brutal moniker coined in appreciation for the zeal in which they cast down the temples and cult strongholds of old Earth. It was as if the very desire to kill the devout became a form of worship for the Imperial Heralds. Wherever enemies stood against the Emperor because of their belief in gods or the superstition of old night, it would fall to the Imperial Heralds to deliver the Emperor's ultimatum: recant or be destroyed. Religious demagogues were purposefully trapped inside their massive fortresses as the Legion set fire to their planet and watched them cook alive. Enclave members of god-worshipping cults were dismembered, and their traitorous entrails were displayed strung together around their domain. For the Imperial Heralds, there was no joy in this act of vengeance. All they cared about was that the mutant, the witch, and the heretic that failed to accept the imperial truth was completely destroyed. The Legion had zero respect for their enemies. They saw no virtue in defiance against the might of the Imperium of Man or the Emperor's enlightenment. From the very beginning, the Imperial Heralds were devout believers of the Emperor's imperial truth. They were the bearers of the ideals of the Imperium, of its vision for a future of humanity, a future that preached rationality, the illumination of knowledge, not the adoration of gods or reliance on superstition and ignorance to gain answers. Because of this, the Imperial Heralds knew that they would drive back the irrationalities of man just as much as the armies of those that opposed the Imperium. They would have to conquer the minds of the ancient and scattered civilizations of humanity just as much as their territories. Such was the case during the fall of Orioke, a city-state of old Earth. Buried in a hollowed mountain in ancient Terra's icebound south, it stood throughout the darkness of the old night, weathering the storm of strife for thousands of standard years. The people of Orioke believed that they were the chosen ones of ancient Terra's blighted children, and that they alone would outlast the anarchy that had broken so many others. This certainty came from their faith in protection from the spirits of death and life, an ancient pantheon of gods worshipped by the people of Orioke. During the Unification Wars, when the Emperor's eyes finally turned to the mountain city, he seemed to have known that soft words and diplomatic overtures would be of little use, and so the Imperial Heralds came to the city and gave it a choice: kneel and accept the imperial truth, or be destroyed. The priest king of Orioke didn't even hear the message before he gave his answer. Fire met the Imperial Heralds' transports as it fell to the ice plains. The Legion began their attack. Macro bombers came out of the snow-filled sky, and the mountain cracked under the rain of seismic charges. On the mountain's flanks, siege tanks coughed shell after shell into fractures in the rock, breaking them wide open. Behind the wind came the gray armored warriors, advancing in a relentless drumroll of gunfire and the hiss of flame. After 3 solar hours of battle, the remaining populace was a huddled flock, crammed into the central cavern. With every other tunnel and cavern district wiped clean of life, the Imperial Heralds halted, sealing the ways in and out of the central cavern. As the survivors waited in silence, they wondered what fate awaited them. Their answer came in a rain of shattered stone and red fire. as the Ashen Circle descended on the survivors like comets flung from a destroyed heaven. The Ashen Circle was a unique formation for the Imperial Heralds. Equipped with jump packs, these fast-moving infantry units scoured the battlefield searching for the enemy's religious icons, charismatic leaders like priests or champions, battle flags, or any other structure of faith. It was their duty to see these cultural landmarks destroyed, and if they managed to catch the worshippers still inside, they would drag them out with hook-bladed axes and slaughter them in a brutal display of punishment. The unit's preferred method of destruction were the Imperium's deadliest incendiary tools, like flamers and phosphact weapons. They all burned, none were spared, and when it was done, the Legion overloaded the geothermal power plants beneath the mountain, causing lava to fill the caverns, swallowing the stone idols and exploding the city-state from the wounds in the mountain's flanks. So fell Orioke, the message of its death carried across ancient Terra and beyond. Faith in false gods would bring only ruin and ashes. Once the Sol system was unified, the Imperial Heralds began to recruit from those children that showed a supreme devotion to the Imperial truth. They were to be the bearers of the word of the Emperor. When such a mantle was bestowed, it was never removed. Some on seeing such a warrior would surrender and renounce their false beliefs. Others would refuse. Many heralds would die at the hands of defiant enemies, pulled down by human hands after slaying hundreds. But always after the black-clad heralds, the Grey Warriors would come with fire and thunder for change. The wars enacted by the Imperial Heralds were direct and functional, while other legions fought in a manner that mirrored their nature. To them, warfare was simply a tool to be applied. The true war existed long before a bullet was fired, and would last long after the last drop of blood had fallen. They were warriors in a war fought in the realm of belief, a war in which the truth was the only real weapon. Once conquest was achieved, the Imperial Heralds would seek out works which spoke of powers of sorcery, false gods, and irrationality. They emptied libraries, divided the continent into truth and falsities. Idols and trappings of worship would be cast down and pulled from the temples and shrines. Those who had preserved the poison of false beliefs would be dragged to the pyre, made of books and carved statues. All would burn together. Those who had been freed from the shackles of ignorance would be given a choice: embrace the Imperial truth or join the pyre. Finally, the great buildings which had sheltered the lies of the past would be pulled down and reduced to dust. Only then would most of the superhuman warriors depart, leaving the saved population to their newly illuminated lives. And although it is easy to focus on the military might of the Imperial Heralds and the cruelty they displayed to their foes, it's also important to realize that conflict was always a secondary solution for them. So long as the enemy was a human empire shackled into some religious doctrine by the effects of the Old Night, the Imperial Heralds always granted them salvation through diplomacy. It is this unique method of conquest that set the Imperial Heralds apart from many of their other brother legions. Even before they met the Primarch, they understood that killing everyone that stands before the Imperium would only lead to a kingdom of ashes, therefore spreading the ideals of the Imperium of Man and being a walking example of the glory of the Emperor was far more important than complete annihilation of the foe. In this more accurate light, we can see that the once Loyalist word-bearers were far more complex than how the Imperium remembers them after the Horus Heresy. Yes, they were unrelenting and deadly, but they spread enlightenment to many worlds. Entire populations were freed from oppressive religious rulers, manipulating and abusing their population. Not only did the Imperial Heralds liberate these people, but they also taught them how to defend themselves from ideologues by seeding the planet with the wisdom of a progressive and, more importantly, secular Imperial truth. It's actually really sad to know that once united with their Primarch, the Imperial Heralds would become the very same villains they fought so righteously to eliminate. Once Lorgar took over the newly named Wordbearers, they spread his own faith, a faith that would go on to doom humanity for centuries to come. Lorgar was able to do this by capitalizing on the Legion's Achilles heel, their deeply ingrained zealotry towards belief, a flaw purposefully created by the Emperor of Mankind. And once again, it becomes the Emperor's fault that yet another one of his legions would go on to betray him. With this understanding, we can go speculate what the outcome would be if any Loyalist word-bearers held on to their beliefs of the Imperial truth and survived the Horus Heresy. If for some miracle, these Battle Brothers would go on to form a second founding chapter and continue to fight for the Imperium, would they go to battle with the same passion to spread these ancient ideals of the Imperial truth? And what would the Ecclesiarchy think about these teachings that go against the very foundation of the Imperial Creed? Now, most Space Marine chapters agree that the Emperor was not divine, but rather the most powerful human psyker and leader of mankind. They understand that if humanity wishes to spread his worship, it is up to man to decide that. But would a successor chapter of the Imperial Heralds adopt the hands-off approach that most modern-day Space Marines do? Could they keep their zealot beliefs in the Imperial truth to themselves, and be viewed with just as much respect as the ancient Imperial Heralds? Or would they be regarded as renegades for spreading the ancient ideals of humanity? But now I pass it on to you guys. What would a successor chapter of the Imperial Heralds look like? And am I right by blaming the Emperor for the fall of the Wordbearers? Was that a gene seed flaw? Comment down in the comment section below. Can't wait to read what you guys have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of our patrons that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. It's just $1 a month. If not, just by listening, liking, and sharing, it really helps out the channel. So thank you guys so much. And if you have any suggestions for any other topics, please let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.